Hello. We are 5 minutes past 4 o'clock, so we have to begin the next session, which has the topic is the empowerment of the indigenous people across the Arctic. And to introduce, there is Carl Christian Olsen, Barter. The floor is yours.
Here in the session, we will talk about the empowerment of the people of the Arctic. But when we discuss economic development, we sometimes have to remember that there is people living across the Arctic people. And we know that their culture is very dependent on the environment and also the opportunities you give for these individuals. So the session here is to talk about experiences and what we want to do today and the future. So we will have a speaker speaks from Nivi Olsen, the Minister of Education, and we will also have a speaker from a leader from the Sami Council, Aili Javo, welcome, and also Ukalak Iqitjak from Inuit Circumpolar Council in Canada, and Yvonne Peter from Canada also? No? From Alaska? Oh, from Alaska, okay. Excuse me. And then we also have Lars Emil Johansen, definitely from Greenland. Nivi, Daganna.
Hello. I'm going to talk about the importance of education for enhancing empowerment. As you know, Greenland is the biggest island in the world. We have a very high level of potential living and non-living resources like fisheries and minerals. On the other hand, we have a very small population, and therefore it is very important that we have efficient human capital. So to enhance the empowerment, we need to invest in our people. PowerPoint. Greenland faces a challenging and exciting future. In recent years, much discussion has been devoted to the subject of what resources that will pave the way for a self-sufficient Greenland. My clear position on this issue is that most important resources is the people. Is the people of our country. In order to create a better future with better welfare and prosperity, we as individual people and as a country as a whole must do our bit to raise the level of education to be able to compete on the global market. Children and youth have many different dreams for their future. This is true both in Greenland and in countries all over the world. Unlike many other countries, we have a unique education system that gives all our children and young people the possibility to educate themselves and realize their dreams. Together, we must inspire our children to get an education, to get the skill, courage, and desire to shape the future. Education is an investment for future self-sufficient Greenland with high influence in political areas of our concern and a higher export through a diverse economy. A self-sufficient Greenland can only become a reality if we raise our education level. A high educational level will make us less dependent from other countries. A high education level brings a qualified workforce, an efficient administration, and an innovative public and private sector, all of which expertise gained through education shall pave way for the future. A qualified workforce will both raise the quality of their own life and the country's GDP. Effective governance and efficient administration are central to meet a country's development goal on both domestic and foreign relations. Innovation and creativity are important for a diverse economy in a constant competitive global market. All of these areas will be met through increase of the educational level. To increase the educational level, we need tools through the entire education system. Two main tools for us are the Education Strategy and Education Plan 2. The Education Strategy is the government's vision and goals for the education sector. The overall goal is that the year group that left elementary school in 2015, 70% must obtain a qualifying education before they reach the age of 35. Today, those numbers are 54%. In order to meet the goals of the strategy, we yearly update our education plan. The education plan follows the structure of the education strategy and describes our education initiatives. The fact that we update it each year will give us the menu for constant change of need and demands. Strategies and plans are very important tools for nation building and empowerment. Toward the outside world, they offer transparency, signal of determination and inspiration. Our education strategy shows our partners the intentions of our policy. This leads to stronger partnership between our countries, subject to understand and to find synergies between our different countries' strategy. Therefore, it is very important that we constantly develop our cooperation within education and research. With these words, I want to say thank you, and I wish you a continuous, fruitful seminar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Nivi Olsen. And the next speaker is Aili Javo from Norway.
Presidents, ministers, indigenous brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen. The Sami people that I represent have a long history in the Fenno-Scandinavian Arctic. Archaeological investigations show that even the northernmost mainland in Sápmi has been settled since the ice retreated 13,000 years ago, while we ourselves believe we have been there since time immemorial. By this, the Sami people has established usufruct rights to lands and natural resources, which makes us right holders in the Arctic. From time to time through history, we have seen others coming with stakes to the region to make borders, to utilize resources, or simply putting their own lives at stake by exploring rough Arctic oceans. During the last couple of decades, we have again seen a steadily increasing interest in the Arctic region, both from the capitals of states with territory in the Arctic and from states with no territory in the Arctic, as well as from scientific, environmental, and economic interests, all claiming some kind of stakeholder status to the region. Most of them introducing their interest by recognizing that the Arctic environment is fragile and its ecosystems are sensitive. We are very aware of that, and that is why our traces on the land are so easy to find and quite visible still today, 13,000 years after they were set. We are proud of our history and the knowledge we have developed for our homelands through living and coping with it through generations. The Sami culture is deeply rooted in the environment, with a climate that most Arctic strategies describe as harsh. The nature and the ecosystems have fed the people in this region through millennia. Our traditional livelihoods leave few traces in the nature. The value of this kind of sustainable land use, I would say, is recognized by the national authorities through large protected areas. To use Norway as an example, 23 of the 37 national parks are established within the traditional Sami and reindeer herding area, which is close to 16,000 square kilometers and 58% of the total national park area in Norway. This tells me that our management has kept the land in a state that authorities today find worth protecting. The traditional livelihoods are still the foundation for our culture and represent our economy, also in modern times. As part of the self-determination as people, we have the right to determine our economic and social development. And we have the right to freely dispose over our natural resources as basis for our culture. With this follows that state authorities in our countries, as well as the private sector, shall consult and cooperate in good faith with affected Sami communities and representative institutions, and that they must obtain their free, prior, and informed consent before adopting and implementing legislative or administrative measures, or engage in activities that may affect us. Respect for this right is particularly important with regard to industrial activities that have the potential to cause considerable harm to the environment and health, such as uranium and thorium mining. Today, the Sami culture faces challenges both through environmental changes and increased interest from stakeholders, in particular for the reindeer husbandry, maybe the most known Sami livelihood. Loss of pastures and biodiversity is the largest threat for the future existence of reindeer husbandry. It is well documented that various kinds of new development projects lead to huge loss of pastures because domesticated reindeer avoids disturbance. Dramatic increase in constructions of cabins, roads, hydro and wind power plants, mines, and other developments in reindeer pastures the last decades makes this a serious threat to the future of the reindeer husbandry. When developing new projects that requires change in land use, it is important that the impacts for the reindeer herding entities in question is not solely considered according to the size of the development project. Accumulated effects for the reindeer husbandry should also be taken into account. To remain resilient, the reindeer husbandry needs flexibility when facing variations in climatic conditions during the different seasonal grazing. This flexibility should not be lost, and this is particularly important in the years to come, with expected impacts of climate change. The Arctic Council celebrates its first 20 years of Arctic cooperation this year. Allow me to be so bold to say that one of the keys to the Arctic Council's success is the human face that 6 indigenous peoples' organizations have given to the Council through their unique role as permanent participants. No other global body recognizes indigenous peoples in this way, providing for their direct and meaningful role at all levels in the Council. You could say that the Arctic Council is a 3-party partnership between states, indigenous peoples, and also scientists. And this is in itself a mechanism that empowers the Arctic indigenous peoples. Inclusion of the indigenous peoples and our needs in the process do not only make better and more balanced outcome and addresses our concerns and needs, it also strengthens our argumentation for action at local level. It was a great achievement at that time, in the early 1990s, for the 3 indigenous peoples organizations, ICC, RIPON, and Sami Council, to be recognized as permanent participants in the Arctic Council. And this was made possible since in particular the Sami and the Inuit already had a long-established relationship and Arctic cooperation. The persons involved in the beginning of the 90s did quite a job with negotiating this position as permanent participants. But, as a wise man once said, one thing is to achieve a position or a right. It is quite another issue to keep it. In this sense, to fulfill the seat in a meaningful manner. Rights achieved and not used can easily slip again. Our focus has been to deliver and fill the role as permanent participant in a meaningful manner, with contributions important for us, and at the same time relevant for the work of the Arctic Council. I think, and I hope that others will agree, that the permanent participants during these 20 years have managed well in addressing our concerns related to contaminants, climate change, human health, and healthy ecosystems. But empowerment of indigenous peoples in the Arctic also means that we need to strengthen the capacity of their societies, organizations, and institutions so that they are able to participate and contribute on an equal level as the other stakeholders. Here, there is still room for improvement. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Aili Java, President of the Sami Council in Norway. And the next speaker is very something for all of us in Arctic. He has been working persistently and to expand the voice of all Greenlanders, and I believe that it also, you have been working for many Arctic people, not only Greenland. But the next speaker is Lars Emil Johansen. Welcome.
Adaqinartoq President Olawa Ragnar Hafgrimsson. Adaqinartut arnat angutitlu. Ulloq juni 2009 Nunaata naalakkarsunik oqorituasaanaan kapitali nutaaq aassartippoq. Ullutaanna nunarput namminersulerpoq. Taassamuli nuia Kalaallit nunat tamaakornanni inatsimalissuit nammineq aalingisinnaassuseqarlutik inuianerat taan aqutialu akuaneqarp taman isumaqarpoq maani nunatsinni nunat tamalaat akornanni inatsisimalilluit nunat inoqqaavisut inisisimayunnaarluta inuiaat allat assigaluit inuiaattut akuaneqartuut tamatum malitsigisaanik pisinnaatitaafiit pisussaaffiillu ilangulluit inuiaavuut namminersulivinnissamut ingerlisut nunarsup immikkoortuani inufiisatsinni inuiaattut atugaasatigut aernartorsuiterpassuit tusiassiorfitigut tusartuartarpuut taakkuli saniatigut siuajaarnerpassuit ajungitsut aamma erseqqissarneqartaajaqartut ajoaluartumik taallersimaneqarpallaartulut ipput nunarput eqqarsaatigaluun 1979 namminersornerlernitikiorna ilinniaaqassutikkut annertuumik qaffariarsimavuq inuusuttut amerliartuinnuissut tungaviusumik ingerlaqqippiusumillu ilinniaaqartalerput nunatsinni nunanilu allani ineriartorneq siumut ingerlavuq kiannilaamma tamatumani innutaas akornanni naliginnaasumik isumaqaqiasoqartarpoq pissutsit suli ajortut angusarpassuavut tulluisumarutissagut ajoraluartumik ajortunit taallersimaneqartuarput tamatumung alatillugu oqallinnerup matumasiunertaa tassalu empowerment pinginnaangorsaanермик kalaasu taasara taan mannak eqqartulassava tulut oqaasilaanna empowerment oqaatiginnarlugu pikkunarpulut maluisinnaavars mikrofonilluunniit artugajappa atigunissa empowerment taa qallunaatut oqaasertaqangilaq ассиингитсорпассуарнит кисанна суяасерсорнеқартарлун нассуяатилли тааккуа мисиссуатаараанни таматумани пинеқарпоқ инуит пииннаангорсарнеқат ниссаат пииннаангорсаанерми сусиннаангитсулут пингитсуисиннаангитсулуллу мисигисарнерит иллуатугалер синнаалерлуит инуит пигиннаасеқалерниссаат пингаартиннеқартарпоқ ааману таан агуниарнеқартарлуни инук намминерсиннаасоқ аксуссааффиминиллу илисимааринниттоқ Taamatut piinnaangorsaane paasillugu issittum nunat inoqqaavinut sammisumik piinnaangorsaanor qanoq inerlanaqarsinnaaneranut innersuustaqassaanga siullermik kammattuutigorusuppaa inuiaqatigiinni tangassamaarutissagut tulluusamaarutissaullu pingaarnerutigissagigut ullumikkornit pingaarnerutilissagigut angusagullu pitsaasut erseqqissarnerusalissagigut piniartuanermit inuiaqatigiinnut nutaaliaasunut tamatuungut alatillugu pisortaqarfinnik ineriartortitsimaneq innuttaasullu qinikkat аққутигалуит наалаккерсуақатааnerata эққуккиартуарнеқарсиманаа укиут фоот киуллиит ингерланеранни писимооқ аёртуссарсиуиннаата ангусагут аюнгитсут питсаасуллу ааллаавигалуит оқаллисериаатсимик пилерситсаариарпуут ааппааттут иннуттаасут акорнанни инуттут атугарисат тунгавигалуит кигунерлуутит самминерусаариақарпуут аторнерлуинермит катсерсарнеқарсинааниссамут имминут напатиссиннаалерниссамут икиорнеқарниссамут кигуаасиутатигут аторнерлугаасиманеруп кигунипилуинит катсерсарнеқарсинааниссамут аторнерлуақатаассуунермиллу катсерсарнеқарниссамут периарфиссаник пилерситсисаариақарпуут эорнарторсиутит тоққортернагит сорлаасигут илуарсиниарнеқарнерисигут инуниарнерми иерлаққинниссамут нукиссақарниссақ тунгавилернеқассаа пингаюаттут пингаарутеқарпоқ қангаанилли инуариаатситта пингаартилатта оқалуттуарисаанитталу эққааманеқартиллу кингуаарину туллернут ингерлатеққиннеқартарниссаат исситтуми наюақартугут илисарнаатигарпут сули писууссутитсиннут уумасунут қаниттумик аттавеқарнерпут сиулигут нунатсинни илаатигут пеққарниссиннаасартуми инуниарсиннаасимаппут пиниариаатсимик иммиккуулаарлуинартумик инериартортитсиманермиккут тааматуллаама пиниагассат никаарнери малиллугит нуттарсиманермиккут пингортитамик писууссутааниллу атуисиннаатитаанерпут сорсуутигивассоорпут пингортитамими нукиссамик ааллертарпуут сули уллу манна тикиллугу сисамааттут пингаарутеқарпоқ исситтуми иннуттаасун акилернеқарсинаасуми сукканерусумиллу интернеттиккут аттавеқалерниссарпут нунарсууп иммиккоортуани инуффигисатсинни сиамасиссумик наюақарнеқ аннертуоқ таамааттумиллу иннуттаасут иларпаруйуссуи нунарсуамеоқатаасутут мисисиманиссаминнут аватитсиннну аватитсинналу паасистиссаник ааллерниссаминнут маттуннеқарсимасут иппут qaasаасиатигут аттавеқаатит пингаарутеқартуарнерисигут аватитсинни писунут малинаанерулиссаагут нунарсууллу иммиккоортуани инуффигисатсинни инуссиссарсиорниккут инериарторфиссат амерсиссиннааллутигит таллимаат алингисууллуиннарторлу тассаавоқ исситтуми инуусуттут илиниақарниссаминнут периарфисеқарниссаат нунатсин илиниарту тамармик илиниақарнерсуутеқарсинаатилааппут таамалу аама илиниақарниссаминнут периарфисеқарлутик инуусуттортатсинник наминерсиннаасуник киффаангиссусеқартуниллу пилерситтиниссамик таманна периарфиссиуоқ Taman amma piinnaangorsanneruoq tassa tamanna amma empowerment tiuoq. Siulian taasakalakkua immikkoortallimat aqusaaruutsigit qularutigingilaa uagut issitormiusuut sakkussaqarnerulissasuut inussissarsiornikkut suliniutit annertuut takkussuutilerpata ineriartornermut paqataanissatinnut nunarsuup immikkoortua inuuffiisarput nunarsuatsini nalagaaffiit alingaarsornikkut nukittunerpaat pingasut akornanni inissisimaoq silallu pissusiisa аллангориарторнерат илутигалугу умиарсуит аторлуит аққутит нутаат аммарнеқарсинааллутик писуусутиут умассусиллит умаатсуллу орнигинеқарпут нуларсуарми аватитсинни инуит амерлиартуиннарнерат инериарторнераллу илутигалугу исситтоқ сиуниссами нуларсуатсинни икуммаассаақ икумматисақарниарниккут нерисиссақарниккуллу қитиусумик иниссисималертуссаавоқ исситтоқ тулут оқаатигалуу хоттиуоқ таматумани пинақарпут илаатиут умиарсуаливинник аатилассани пиаавинник ангуп нукианик иннааллагисиорфинник тааккулингалу суллиссивинник пилерсиитсиорторнерит qularutissaangilaqsiunissami nukissoornermi takornariartittinermi aalisarnermi nutaaliorlunilu suliniarnerup iluani sulifaqarfiit amerlanerusut piusunngortinneqartalarumaarmata ineriartornermi issittumi najuallit paqataatineqarnissaat suliniutit iluatsinnissaannut qitiuoq tamannalu aningaasiliissuteqarusuttut inuutsissarsiortullu puuyussangilaat suliniuti tamakku issittumi innuttaasut inuuniarnerminni pittaanerusunik atuaqalernissaannut аққутиссуussaapput исситтуми пиуюартитсинермик тунгавилиммик инериарторtitsioqarsinnaangilaq исситтуми инуит наюаллит пақатаангиппата инуиаттут пиаарсмасаагарпуут наминернуулерниссатсиннут аққутиссуусеқатааниссамут аватаанит анигаасалииссутеқарфиинеқарсинна нааниссатсиннут нунарсуамиоқатаасулут киффаангиссусеқартутут nunanik allanik suleqateqarsinnaane aningaasarsiornikkut ineriartornermut pingaruteqarpoq tamanna aamma piinnaangorsaanaruoq tassa empowerment qena
Lars Emile Rønner, thank you to Lars Emil Johansen. Next speaker is chairing ICC Council in Canada. Ukalak Igitjak. I hope I use like Igitjak. Taganna. Ukalak Igitjak.
Kayunami pigiarota qarmaqqai uvani gajangittugu inuuligut kayunami qalkuma sivilertiorrattarsimayuni isuataqajaorrattarsimayuni ICC kunnut teikwa ngummatik pikunnartausimayugu ullumimursimammayugu. I'd like to recognize a couple of people who helped establish ICC at the time, who have empowered us to be here today, I think, is a good way to start the session. Hans Pavia Rosing, I think he's sitting up here, over here. Amalu Akalukling. He's been a long-time leader in the ICC world. You guys have empowered me to be here. Thank you very much. I'd also like to acknowledge Yalmar Dahl. He's not here. He's in New York defending our indigenous rights in the UN. I was just in the UN with Yalmar. So he's there empowering us so that we could be empowered to be who we are and how we want to do it. One of the things that I'd like to use as an example, I'm going to use a couple examples that could empower us or do empower us, is the work that we initiate as Inuit. Not being directed by government, not being directed by industry, but initiated by Inuit. One of those initiated things that I'm working on right now with Kuupik Kleist, the former Premier of Greenland, one of those things that we're working on right now is that the ICC established the Piquet-Sursok Commission. The Piquet-Sursok Commission was a vision of Puyu Olsen. So I thank him for that too. The Piquet-Sursok Commission is looking into how Inuit have used in the past and their relationship and their partnership with high Arctic Inuit around the Grisfjord area and the Kanap area, the Northwater Pelinia, the largest biodiverse area in the Arctic. We're consulting with Inuit first to talk about how they have used the area historically, their relationship with each other with the communities before borders were created, or passports were created, or passports were required, and have them share their stories about their relationship with each other, their usage of the Northwater Pelinia, and then how they want to see that area either protected, either conserved, managed by Inuit, for Inuit. I think that's an important concept to start with because this vision was Puyu's, and it's a vision that we are trying to carry through from the Inuit, for the Inuit. As well, I was introduced earlier as the previous QIA president, Kajutani Inuit Association president, where we negotiated the Inuit Impact Benefit Agreement with Baffinland, the iron ore mine in the North Baffin. That's an example of empowerment in the QIA region, where we negotiated with the mining company on what resources will be spent where and how. The 5 impacted communities negotiated money for social issues, to address social issues, funds for things like hunter support programming in the impacted communities, funds for how to live with a person who was working at the mine for 2 weeks in and 2 weeks out, because he or she leaves a family for 2 weeks, and that family is impacted. So we negotiated all these things to empower the community, to empower Inuit for economic development and by economic development. With regards to mining, I think everybody here knows that we had a few issues with the last Canadian government and their priorities and how they were implementing their resource-strong focus in Canada. They were investing in education for mining, education for resources. They weren't investing for education for opportunities for our youth. I think that's one of the things that we should do is to invest in education, in also culturally appropriate education. This is where Inuit have been wanting to go for a long time. Some of the examples recently that I've seen on the internet through Facebook, I'm big on Facebook. I think everybody here knows that. To use some example in Nunavik where a group of ladies just finished a comic making course. And there was so much pride on the internet about that fact, that they finished their first comics. We also have that in Kalaallit, where I'm from, at the Tukasiapik Center, where they do a lot of culturally, they do a lot of cultural programming with the local community, like comic making and skills development for men to go out on the land. So they spend half the day on skills development, and then the other half with some basic academic skills, basic academic development. And they have from last I heard, they have a 100% attendance rate, which is great. No, that's empowerment. When you use culturally appropriate programming and education. As well as culturally appropriate priorities in the case of Baffinland and our negotiation with the IIBA in the Impact Benefit Agreement. Back to the previous government again. One of the things that the Labour government at the time before the last Conservative government negotiated with Indigenous peoples was the Aboriginal Healing Foundation to deal with the effects and impacts of residential schools. The Aboriginal Healing Foundation was starting to work in Nunavut. I could use Nunavut as an example because that's what I know. And the Inuit world, I think, The Inuit world in general with the Aboriginal Healing Foundation. Their programming, their local programming, empowered communities to set up their own healing programs and support the healers in that work. That programming was starting to work when the Conservative government came into power. It didn't take them long to cut it. I always use that as an example of empowerment for local programming, local services, local capacity building. So consecutive governments, one thing to learn from Inuit is to build on what works at the local level. Don't just create new programs because you're a new government. Build on what works. I hear that. 1 minute? Okay. Anyway, yes, and thank you for that. And I'd like to thank our leaders again who are here, previous leaders, recent leaders, and today's leaders, and tomorrow's leaders. When Indigenous peoples are empowered, everybody wins. Kridnami.
Thank you to Ukaluk, Yichak. And now the last speaker is Yvonne Peter from Alaska Fairbanks, excuse me. He's Vice Chancellor for Rural Community and Native Education, University of Alaska Fairbanks.
Shalaknai, Chutungwinzi, Shoji Yvonne Peter Oji, Vashank Ogutsnithli, Nets Aiguch Nights are Quakanithli, Zagishig and Jitchoithli. Hate O Greenland, Nick Kuchinai, Tatak. I want to thank Premier Kilson and President Grimson for the invitation to share a few words here. If you were trying to listen to that through translation, it probably didn't work. I wanted to share with you a little bit of the Gwich'in language, the language that I grew up with in my community. I want to thank you for inviting me here to share a few words on the empowerment of Indigenous peoples of the Arctic. Before I begin, I want to also thank the people of this land for hosting us here. My name is Yvonne Peter. I'm Gwich'in, and I come from a village called Vashainko in northern Alaska in the Brooks Mountain Range. In English, they call my village Arctic Village, in case you decide to Google Earth where I'm from. It's a small village of about 135 people in the Brooks Range, as I mentioned. It's over 200 miles from the nearest city and only accessible by small plane. To this day, in my village, there's still no piped running water, although we did get electricity when I was a small child. If I had more time, I'd tell you the story of my first encounter with electricity, but I don't have time, but I can assure you it was a very empowering experience. Some people say that's why I'm the way I am today. Our people live from the land with minimal employment opportunities. It's not an easy life there, but it's a fulfilling life. We love our way of life, and we love the land from which we come. Today, I live in the city of Fairbanks, 230 miles south of Vashainko. I moved there 12 years ago to pursue my graduate education. Prior to this move, I was serving as the tribal chief for my people. It is from these perspectives of a community leader and a pathway through education that I will share with you this afternoon. I'm also a storyteller, so through my story, I'll share my insights with you. My mother moved us from the village to Fairbanks when I was becoming a teenager because she wanted me to receive a stronger school-based education. But like many of our Native men in Alaska, I became a high school dropout. Few people had hoped that I would do anything with my life. But as I came to terms with the circumstances I witnessed our people facing around me, I chose to turn things around and pursue higher education. I saw this as a path that would help people choose to listen to what I had to say and perhaps even value my insights and opinion. Once I got there, I discovered how much I had to learn and realized the transformative value of higher education. From my youngest years, I can remember I was influenced by many mentors. Among them was Chief Peter John of the Minto people, who passed away at 102 years of age in the early 2000s. He only worked 3 months in a Western job in his entire life. He spoke to the role of higher education, though, in a speech in 1994 at the university. He foresaw that through education, our people would garner the tools to revitalize our languages, cultures, and identities. That education would provide us with the capacity to navigate and adapt to a rapidly changing world we found ourselves facing. As a high school dropout, of course, I was not initially accepted into the institution. But then there was a native Polynesian who happened to be an acceptance officer at the university. He offered to give me a chance by waiving the acceptance rules if I would commit to give it my all. Once in the system, I was picked up by the Comprehensive Native Student Advising Center. They held my hand through filling forms, scholarship applications, counseled me when I was frustrated with Western academics. That happened a lot. Guided me in course and faculty selection, and provided a space for us to gather and practice our cultures as Alaska Native students. This level of comprehensive student advising is critical to degree completion for many of our Alaska Native and Indigenous students. Since completing my first degree in the 1990s, I've been blessed to serve in a multitude of capacities at the village, regional, state, national, and international levels. They span work as an education administrator, tribal chief, renewable energy manager for a microgrid utility, a private business owner, and culturally based behavioral health practitioner, utilizing Indigenous knowledge and practices to address the issue of suicide among our youth. In addition to my current position at the university, I also serve as a board member to the Gwich'in Council International, which represents us within the Arctic Council Forum. In working with our communities and people, I embrace work through two overarching themes that are interconnected: healing and self-determination. In academic arenas, these themes are fundamental to a process referred to as decolonization. On a basic level, This is a process of becoming a healthy, balanced human being, in our case, rooted in Indigenous culture and identity, and having self-determination in political and economic systems that impact our people's livelihoods and future. In my own journey, this included learning about the 7 years that my mother was sent away to be assimilated into mainstream society, and learning about the associated traumas and separations she experienced afterwards. And myself going through a healing process and forgiveness for my own mother, understanding the circumstances that she had to face during that time of rapid transition culturally for our people. It included learning about being disenfranchised for the first 100+ years of Western colonization in the Arctic and the decades of work from leaders before me for us to attain basic rights to citizenship and to our right to our ways of life. I appreciate the acknowledgement of a few of the elders that were here in this room that were a part of the formation of ICC. They're among those who I hold a high regard for because of the work they did laying the foundation for us to be here today. But this work is not done. Given the new elevated focus on the Arctic and the opportunities and challenges that now present themselves, it is a critical time to ensure that Indigenous peoples have representation and voice with equal footing at the economic development and decision-making tables. This is not only for the benefit of Indigenous peoples, but it is of mutual global benefit. Within humanity broadly, we are in need of fundamental shifts towards long-term and sustainable economic models that take into account a value-based and holistic perspective relative to a broad nexus of interrelated dimensions, such as food, energy, water, infrastructure, health, and economy. The cultural values and epistemologies embedded in Indigenous knowledge systems are fundamentally holistic and multi-generational in nature. I foresee that Indigenous knowledge and wisdom will need to help guide how development happens if we intend it to be sustainable for future generations. We live in the Arctic and intend to stay in the Arctic, so we have an incredibly vested interest in the outcomes of any development that may occur. On a practical level, what does this mean? Since my remarks are focusing on the theme of education, I will elaborate in this area. There is no one size-fits-all solution, because in the Arctic we are working in many different systems and circumstances, so I will share from my own experience. Our people are often torn between practicing a culturally based subsistence lifestyle connected to family, land, and community, or post-secondary education. The coursework and programs are not always relevant to the challenges or opportunities faced at the community level, and they rarely reflect Indigenous knowledge and pedagogy. At the University of Alaska, we develop programs that allow students to stay in their village, continue to practice subsistence lifestyles, continue to work and provide for their families while attaining bachelor's, master's, and PhD degrees in the field of Indigenous studies. These programs are designed to provide training, studies, and research in areas relevant to the challenges and opportunities faced by our people and communities. Systemically, the University of Alaska Fairbanks created my position as Vice Chancellor to help champion Indigenous and Alaska Native studies and student support programs. We emphasize both academic and workforce development in the trades and access across Alaska. I manage 6 campuses, serving 160 communities, covering 2/3 of the state of Alaska. We place a high value on Indigenous knowledge and in Indigenous leadership. In our training and academic programs, as well as our public service, we foster and support Indigenous self-determination and self-governance. We see this as a long-term benefit for all peoples of the North. The university is not perfect in these areas, but we have made a long-term commitment, and I believe we are on the right path. At this time, our Indigenous Studies PhD program has such a high demand that we can no longer accept all the prospective students trying to get in. And this August, we're bringing on board 3 new Alaska Native professors to our faculty. In conclusion, we empower Indigenous peoples through taking action, through making real and long-term investments in the development of Indigenous peoples and communities. We do this because we understand the tremendous value Indigenous peoples bring to the decision-making tables and the global community. In the education sector, I encourage substantial investment to support Indigenous peoples in post-secondary education and workforce development. Solid financial backing and comprehensive student advising are 2 keys to success in this area. Let us work together to demonstrate a sustainable future grounded in deep mutual respect and wisdom, It's a privilege and honor to be here with you all, to be a part of these conversations, and I look forward to what comes from these. Thank you very much. Masicho.
Now we have opportunity to have some questions. Nalua kina aberniarnersuq. Aqalup.
Can I just shout?
Yeah.
I'm coming for you.
Ima nutserisukkut. Saaluk.
Ja, qoilaq uqaatiineqartulut aqaluklangami ataqarpunga. Ukiorpaalussuit nunai noqqaavisa. Atugaat pillu qallissimagut aamalu inuiaassuseq taannaana pillu appaatigut akilaarussukkaluartunga. Sualummik nunatsinni inatsiartut siuittaasuat oqaasi paasinerlussimangikkukkit ima oqarami maannakku inuiattua kuorsaavugut taava nuni noqqaavus pisinnaataaffit takkua sussa imaluunniit illuartiinnerallaq nalua taanna taama kalaasoqaatiineqartu paasassaanerс soq laasimit paattorpak. Well, the question is on the speech of the President of the Greenland Parliament, the question about indigenous people's rights and the recognition of the Greenlandic people as a nation. As of 2003, the Danish Supreme Court ruled that there was only one indigenous peoples in Greenland, which was all of us here, that we call ourselves Kalaallit, the Inuit part of Greenland. That has been the position of both the state and the home rule government in 2003. When we achieved the self-government system in 2006, we did that through negotiation, and it was agreed on through passing a law at the Danish Parliament and giving the Greenlanders right to use their resources, both living and non-renewable resources. This law was presented to the United Nations in 2009, and it doesn't mention that we are recognized as a people. It mentions that the territory of Greenland is now self-governed. Just to emphasize, Inuiattut akuanaqa qassimassagut tataan apequsorusunngila kisen nuna inoqqaavisa pisinnaataaffit annaaneqarsinnaangillat Kalaallit nunaat naminersortungornissaat tungaanut aaqqiyartuarnerma. I just want to emphasize that indigenous people's rights will exist even under the Greenland self-rule, and that if it's a problem, then we will have to use all our judicial skills to try and find out why. But I think it's important to understand for the administration and the Greenland Parliament that we still have the indigenous people's rights, our collective rights. That's why we are able to hunt whales, and that's why we have a collective right to land. So that I think is important that the President of the Greenland Parliament also clarify that we cannot lose our rights that way. Thank you.
Bueno. Lars Emil, Lars Emil.
Ja, utoqatsorpa aqqaluk Mr. ICC pattortilaarsimaakit 10 minutes quli iluanni oqaatsit sapingisamik takivallaangitsut alorluit nassuat takivallaangit alorluit oquluniarsuuga anu qatiniga inuna inoqqaasu piginnaattaaffit saniatigut inuiattut akuarisaaguut inuiattut akuarisaanerpaamma nuna inoqqaasu piginnaatitaaffiingisaqaluatsinnik аллани пигиннаатитааффаарфи фиилерсимаарпут соорлу наминиливинниссарпут уунамна алингерсиннаарпут нуна инуиаттут акуанеқарнерпут тунгавиалугу аама наммина оqaатсуут аторлуит нунатсинингерлатсинаагуут аама нунамут писуустаанул пигинниттуссаанерпут агусиннаарпут асиингитсутиут инуиаттут акуанеқарнер таан оqaатигиннарпаа соонами нуна энеққаависсулеқатигиффин ассиингитсуни аама нунарпут писортатигортуми аама пеқатаавоқ инатсартут пеқатаасарпут иффинни нуна энеққаа пиллуит сулинеранни тариуппунга таан пааттусутигиссан киппут нуна иноққаавиунит тасиниатиут инуиаавуут силерсорми инуиа алласигалуут
Ja, quen Lars Emil. Der var Sara Olsvig. Sara Olsvig.
Rønner. Sarah Olsvig, I'm the leader of Inuit Ataqatigiit, which is the largest opposition party. It's been really interesting to listen to all of your presentations. I'm sorry I wasn't in the room for one of the presentations. My daughter lost both her phone and her key. It's not a very good thing when you're a 9-year-old. But I was wondering one thing from the previous session to this session that I think is very important to address at these Arctic conferences. Of course, we've managed to put the Arctic on the agenda worldwide. We've managed to put industrial development and shipping and business opportunities on the map for the Arctic, by the Arctic, and for everybody else in the world. But have we managed enough to address the issue of the increasing inequality we have in our societies in the Arctic? And what do we do when we have these conferences where we share different kinds of views and share different kinds of experiences in regards to put more emphasis on the need to fight and work against the inequality? We are talking about education, which is very important, but if we don't manage to create more equality in our societies, I think a lot of people from our societies will be lost in that development. So it will be interesting to hear from the panel what your views are on that, and how do we work together to make sure that we turn that development in the Arctic and make sure that we have an increased equality in our societies and among our peoples.
Bueno, giver Agisava. Yvonne, Peter?
Yes. Yeah, excellent question, and I think I alluded to it. Similar, it's hard to get so much into 10 minutes of time. You have to decide where you want to go into depth, and I referred to the importance of integrating indigenous values and worldviews into economic models, because I do feel like many of the economic models currently at play within the financial sector do generate greater inequality and unsustainability. And I do think that within indigenous values, knowledge systems, and understanding, that if integrated, we can help to shift that towards a more sustainable and equitable way of moving forward with economic models. And so I do think that that's a fundamental piece of the conversation that's very important for the broader government, business, and indigenous communities to have.
Thank you for that question. One of the things that ICC does with other indigenous peoples at the UN and Arctic Council levels, and we did it quite hard in Paris at COP21, is to talk about how even in Inuit in Canada, Inuit in Greenland, Inuit in Alaska, Canada, and Greenland are considered developed countries, but a lot of our communities are also underdeveloped or third world conditions. And usually when funds are made available for indigenous peoples, it's for indigenous peoples in developing countries. So Inuit don't qualify in Canada, Inuit don't qualify in Alaska, Inuit don't qualify because we're in developed countries. So we're always lobbying for changes to those kinds of criteria when funding is made available so that Inuit could come up to par and be equitable, I guess, with the rest of the world.
Well, thank you. So we can maybe have one more last meeting.
Tessura oqatila inarusullu saorsi oqatisaanut atatilluwa isuarappuga oqallinnitsinni aama sort ingerlalluarfu torrallatavut saqquminaartingippallarigut imaangila ajorisuut oqatiissankuut kisianni taakkuinnavissuit ajortuinnavissuit eqqartornagit aama pitsaaqutigut ajungitsorpassuarna aama agusaqaat issittumi soppasuan taguisinaaluorpua massakkusianni oqatiinnarsino nukissiutitigut agusaassartuussuut alisarnikkut atortorissaati agusaassartuussuut soppasuartigut ajornartorsiutitsin akiuiniarlagu saassartuussuut ulo oqatiinarusuppa pingaarnerpaa oquannut demokrati atorlua aqutissasuut pingaarnerpaa uannut piuaannartittinissaq ataqqillu ingerlatissasuut annooniutiin arnerpinnagu isanni demokratiikkut aqutissat atorluit taulu aama pisuussutitsinnik nunguttaaliuinissartungavialugu
Qoinaq imma piffissaautili but imma abeqqut affaq maybe last taganna.
Hello, my name is Hatla and I'm the director of Iceland School of Energy at Reykjavik University. Thank you for excellent presentations. Very much agree on the importance of education for people's empowerment. My question or thought is on brain drain. I'm curious to know what your community's experience is on brain drain. Do you have any statistics on how many people that actually leave your communities for higher education actually return back and so forth? So maybe just an open question to all of you. Thank you.
Can we have a very quick answer or question? Answer, yeah, please.
Kerallisua kissuunga. Qoyanaapeqqummun nunatsinni unamminartut ilangigaat annertooq ukiunimakkunani passupparput ilinniarsimasut aammalu ilinniakkamitiнгусисимасунуна аватаани ангерлартинниарнери ajornakusoortarmata тассанилу соорлу илинниартоқарфиит каттуффинио қалоқатеқарнерми соорлу оqaатингинеқартарпоқ тассани нунамут утеққинниссамут апорфиунерпаарпаасарту илангигаат соорлу меэққаривеқарнерит меэққаатуарфии питтаасут нуналу инууффигиуминартоқ инуяақатингиит ингерллуартут тааккуусартут илинниарсималлуни утерфигиниссаанут накерилерситсинерпаасартут тассанилу унаммисақарпугут аама тааккуиннаангиммата утертинниарнерани ajornartorsiut кисианни аама утереерлутсик нунааватаанут нунасиниссамиалиангертартут таанну унамминиарнерани уаисумақарпунга нунамик тангассимаарутингинниннеқ аамалу аллангуисиннаанерми такусақарсиннаанеқ таана амингаатаасартоқ соорлу системерпу амерласуутингут эққарсаарнартартоқ инериарторнера укиунеқаниттуни аллангоруннангиттоқ инуусутторпассуи такусарпакка оқимаарсарлутик соорлу писсутсини соорлу меэққаатуарфиини меэққаминнут нааммагинангиттуми ингерлатитсисоқарнера пеққутингалугу нууттариақартуни таакку тасса пингаарнерпаанунами маани унитсиссагутсигут инуи пиккориссунооқарнери меэққаатуарфии меэққеривиит ааммалу инуяқатингиит пеққиссут таакку пилерситтариақарпагут Quyanaq.
Quyanaq. Tawa Lars Emilie minutiaffa nakadaarsa
Des uamdan sort nivioqatigeraa uamdan misismo putmangan nussort. Ismaapo misisaartu kalaallarpa qarsaatigalu oqarluta iliniarsuus tamas qaitsi nunarput naminarsoq qanuallu pilersisaiput suleqataagitsi bloktisko qanuallu adornaarsisinnaarp sulias ersaaqinnaartoq suliaratigu pilersausiornisum taamaattum ismaapo kalaalqatsuut sumiittulluun taam akkikaassaaluart.
Ja Quyanaq tawalu inkatoa takanna. Tamaju ila. Yes. Kutsavigas tamassi. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you for a very interesting session. We could have been maybe an hour or two just on this topic. But we have to move on according to the program, and the next section has a topic, the future of Arctic business, living resources. And to present the speakers, Mr. Emanuel Rosing is a head of department in the Ministry of Fisheries, Hunting and Agriculture. The floor is yours, Emanuel.
Thank you. Excellencies, ministers, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we now have a session on future of Arctic business about living resources. Before we start with 8 speakers, let me make a short introduction. The hunting of living resources is a vital component of everyday life and culture in the Arctic, as it has been for thousands of years. It's a traditional way of life that is based on the principle of sustainable use of living resources. In a modern context, the exploitation of living resources has also become an important industry for the Arctic countries. This session will explore specific business opportunities for Arctic countries as both domestic and export markets for fisheries and other living resources continue to expand. In this dialogue, speakers also will consider how Arctic people have a long-standing history of utilizations of living resources that is not limited to sources of subsistent foods and materials. First speaker on the topic is Minister for Fisheries, Hunting and Agriculture from Government of Greenland, Mr. Carl Christian Kruse. And remember to put your caddies on because he will deliver his speech in Greenlandic.
Quyanaq tassiullermik maanayut tunut nunatsinni alisarnerm piniarnermut nunalorinermullu naalakkersusutut saqqummiinissannut periarpissinneqarnin quyavunga alisartugunga aamalu piniartuullunga nunaqarpinguamillu kingoqqisuullunga kingoqqippinnulu nunamnayungaqartut pisuussutivut piyuartillungut ingertaarpingisimasaanni maana nangitisutut ingertatsivugut Piniattuunermik. Manut arisattuunermut aamikaarsaarsimaguut. Arisattuunerlu nunatsinni inuutissarsiutit maannakkut pingaarnersarivaat. Nunattaavammut niuoteqarnerani 90% agullugu arisarnermit isertineqartarpoq. Tamaattumik nunatsinni naalakkersuisut arisarnerup pingaaruteqassusaa iltersorneqartariaqassusaalu ааллаавигалугу сиунissamут илусилерсуинеқ маана ингерлаппарпут пиуартитинермик ингерлаавеқартитсаллута сиулиина оқарниттуут нунап писуисутитта тунниусиннаасаи мианералугут нунап инуинут инусутигинеқарниссаат тунаартаалугу ингерлаарпингалутсигу тамаатторли аама аалисарнеруп илуани таматта нунап матумап инериартортиннеқарнерани такусиннааварпут аалисарнеруп нунарпут кисими кивиссиннаангиккаа кисиалли сусатеқарту аллат таманна қақиккумарпаат исситтуп имартаани нуақарпингисатсинни пингааруутеқарпоқ исситтум наюақартут атаатиморниссарпут илаатингут тунгавингалуит нунарсуармиоқатингииннит исситтуми писуисутитта писариақартиннеқарнерат пиуманеқарнерат илисимасарпут сиуниссами анингаасарсиорниккут тунгавингиссаллугу тунгавингиуассаллугулу ингерлаарпингисариақаратсигу укиуни кингуллорни нунатсин исситтуми наюақарпингисатсинни илисимасарсмаарпуттаақ нунарсуармиоқатаанерпут нунарсуармиоқатаанитсиннилу писуисутитта қаноқ пиуманеқартигинерат тааннааварлу ниуерниккут сули наалаккерсуусуни аннертусассаллугу сулиаалугу ингерлатарпут илаатингут писассиисутитингут қаппаатитериннангиккалуарлута таамаатторли инуиақартингиинни писаринеқартартут налитунгорсарнеқарнеранник ааллаавеқартумик ақутиссиутиссаллутигу таманналу сулиақ налаккерсуусуни ингерлатарпут инуутиссарсиортуник соқутигисақартуник ингерланнеқарниссаанут налаккерсуусут таперсерсуинертик нангиллугу ингерлаттуссааваат кисалуттаақ нунарсуармиоқатингиинни писисартут киссаатеқарталерсимаппут пиуааннартитсинермик ааллаавеқартумик меққилерсорнеқарсимасуник аннерусумик писиниссаминник сиуннерпеқарлутик таманна калааллунуаанни раянут аамалу арнарлуисуааннут атуутсиннеқалерсимаппут таматуми малитсигисааник меққилисиманеруп илисиманеқартутуут нунанаюнгарпут ангеқаақ имартаққортоқатунилу илаалу сули аннерусумик илисиманеқалерсиманани таамааттумик илисиматууссутсиккут аама илисимасат нутарсартуарниссаат имартатталу аалисаккатсигут писуиссутеқарпиусут тамаккиинерусумик илисиманеқарниссаанут сулинеқ ингерлаавартиссаллугу наалаккерсуисут сулинертик ингерлаппаат сулиан оқаарниттут сулиассақ пингаарутеқақисоқ наалаккерсуиниккут сиунертақ тассаавоқ нунатсинни писуисутитта тамаккиинерусумик нунарсуармиоқатитсиннут ниуотигинеқарниссаат ақутиссиутиссаллугу сулиассартақарпоқ аллангортитассақарпоқ тааккуалу нунами наюккатсинни сулиссақартут пеқатигалугат инерисарниссааса сулиаанеқарнерат ингерлатарпут наамассиниссаата тунгаанут сулиарассақарпут таамааттортаамма пингортитақ инуутиссарсиорпугисарпут исситтуми ukiun kingultorni аллангуутааса малитсигисааннит аалисакканутаат нунатсини инуутиссартиутингинеқарнерат аалтарнсарнеқалерсимавоқ нунарсуармиоқатитсинник аамалу синерисатсинник аалисарнеқартартут таамаатторл аама нунарпут писуиссутин тааккунинга нунатсинниинераанни имартиатсинниинерааннилу пеқатааниссамини ингерлатақалерсимавоқ ингерлатақарнераталу инерисарнеқарниссаа алаккерсуисунит пингаартут исигалугу инерисаарнерит ингертатавут ингертаттуссаавагут инерисарлугуллу qularingilaaru aamma issittumi nayuaqartut inuit pisuussutitsinnik taamatut annertunerusumik ineriartortitinermut tamarmik simippigisaminni soqutigisaqartut taakkualu ataqqivavut soqutigisaminnit nunaminni pittangorsaanисsamут инериартортитинерминник ингерлатақарнерат тааmatut таақ нунами ангисууми имартаққортуумилу инуиааллу икиттунгуит уангут наюоқарпитсинни инерисаарниарнитсиннилу аама тааматут атаққинеқарниссарпут инуиақатигисиннерлугут пингаартиппарпут нунами оқарерниттут инуиса писуисутитик мианералугут инуунерминни маани тунгавигиматиккик тааматут таарлу нунаммаани тунгавилисуисимасут пиниарнермиккут анигаасартиорпеқарсинаанерис инериартортинеқарнерат пингаутеқарпоқ уллумиккут туттуниарнермик аамалу умимманиарнермик анигаасартиутеқарнеқ нунатсини ингерлавоқ налаккерсууниккулли соқутигисараарпут аама пиниартуунерми анигаасиутигинеқарсинаасу аллат aqutisiuneqarnissaat nunarput isorattоqaaq inuqarpiit ilaat sikittakkatsiinni inuutissarsiornikkut annerisuun periarpisaqangittuni qangatullu piniartuunermik ilittoqqussaminnik ingerlataqartutik piniartuusut anigaasarsiorpissaannik periarpisaqalersitinissaq sulissutingaarput naak akerlianik piniartuunerup nunarsuarmioqatitsinnik tatineqarnera sakkortooq misingisimasarput misinginikuusarpullu aqqusaarersимагалуарлутингу никаллунгилагут уппералунгулу нунатсинни писуиссутитсинник пиуааннартитсинермик нунатта писуиссутааник атуинермик ингерлатақартуунитсиннит тааналу нунарсуармиоқатитсиннут qaammarsaasutiginera ingerlatissаарput лисиманеқарпоқ сунияқатингиппинник ассингиттуник татинеқарнеқ қанеқ саккортутигисоқ нунап инуини маани санилерисатсиннилу тааккуалу инуиақатингиинни инуиаат амортиарторнераанни нерисақарнеруллу инериарторнераанни аама нунарсуарми атунгаалерсиннаарнерат aqutisiutissallungu suliaq ingerlanneqarpoq kisalu nunatsinni nersutit tunisiaaneqartut tunisisiorsinnaasullu maannamut pingasut pingaavut kangertussuarmi narsami aamalu tuttuuteqarpiu avammut niuorsinnaanermik пеқарнератингут тааккуали аннертусаарсуппагут писуиссутитта аама аватааник пилерсуумеқааннерата нунарсуармиоқатитсиннут пилерсуоқатааниссами аторнеқарниссаат аққутиссуутиссаллутингу тамаатторли аама накатаатсингут инерисаанерит маанна атулерсимасагут тассилу имманаасуиник инуутиссарсиорнеруп инериартортиннеқарнера алтартинеқарсимавоқ тассуунаккуллу намминерисамит ингерлатақартуусут наалаккерсуиниккут таперсуссаллугут нунатсини анигаасарсиорнеруп таасима тунгаатингут ингерталерниссаа тамаккинерусоқ тикинниссааттунгаанут Ilaqataapingissaarput aqutissiulluullu. Taamatut uqaatoqarluga saqqummiusissakka saqqummiuppakka ukualusaninni uittullu ilissinnut saqqummiisussat kananaaraakka saqqummiussassaat tusassallugut aamalu neriuppunga apequtiqarpiusinnaasoq pippisaqalaa pingisinnaassangipput taamatut saqqummiullunga quavunga.
Thank you, Mr. Carl Christian Kruse. I would like to mention that it will be possible to ask some brief, concrete questions after all speakers has delivered the speech. And the next speaker is Vice President for Responsible Renewable Resources in Makivik Corporation, Mr. Adamitis Alagu. The floor is yours.
Nice podium. I guess it's for the non-Viking DNA in us, a little step. Jack! Good evening. Nusakut, Konak Swak, Nakumik. Thank you. Fellow panelists, distinguished guests, I'm honored to participate in this gathering of leaders and renowned specialists from around the Arctic Circle here in Nuuk. I have been at the 2 previous Arctic Circles in Reykjavik, and I'm particularly pleased that I've been invited to come to this one. Oh, I have slides that I have to... How does it go? Can you stop my time? Okay. So I trust this presentation will give you the information about our region, a better understanding of Makivik Corporation, our current businesses and subsidiaries, enterprises, some of our challenges and issues that we face, our resources, benefits, and Nunavik Inuit, and the future of businesses and opportunities that we have within. So for those of you who do not know Nunavik, Nunavik is the area, it is shown on the map here. It's our homeland of Nunavik Inuit located in northern Quebec, Canada, and the surrounding offshore. The total surface area is 507,000 square kilometers, representing approximately 1/3 of the land base of the province of Quebec. 12,000 some odd Inuit live in Nunavik, comprising of 90% of the resident population. The balance of inhabitants are people from various ethnicities, employed by various local and regional organizations, ranging from hospitals, schools, municipal services, stores, as well as mining sector. We live in 14 communities spread along the coast, and the region is only accessible by air during the open water or by sea during the open water season. Neither road nor railway connect the region, which is a reality which astronomically increases the cost of living. The largest community is Kuujjuaq, where I now live, and it is the administrative hub, and the region, it is the administrative hub and where Makivik has its head office. This shows a picture of our last board meeting of Makivik Corporation in my home community of Kalaallit. Makivik Corporation is a birthright organization established in 1975 to represent the Nunavik Inuit ethnic rights pursuant to the James Bay Northern Quebec Agreement, the first modern land claim agreement in Canada. Makivik, which means in Inuktitut to rise up, is a fitting name for the organization mandated to protect the Inuit of Nunavik. The Inuit rights, interests, and financial compensations provided by the aforementioned JB&QA. Although non-for-profit, the corporation's various mandates range from owning and operating large profitable businesses, enterprises, and generating jobs to social economic development, improving housing conditions, to the protection of Inuit language, culture, and natural environment. Makivik's successes demonstrate the extent that the modern Aboriginal treaties and land claims agreement can benefit both governments and Inuit. Makivik is composed of 5 elected executives with mandates including political representation, corporate governance, economic development, and fiscal management. In my capacity as Vice President, I lead the department responsible for environment and renewable resources in Nunavik, which include a state-of-the-art research center in Kuujjuaq. Studies are conducted with collaboration with universities, provincial and federal agencies. Some of the research activities include wildlife monitoring, including abundance estimates, ensuring country food is safe to eat for Nunavik Miut to eat. Makivik is also signatory to the Nunavik Inuit Land Claim Agreement, which in effect since 2008. We own 80% of all islands, including both surface and subsurface rights. In the Nunavik Marine Region, totaling some of 5,300 square kilometers, also institutions of public government with a decision-making authority have been established to address wildlife, land management, and development impact issues. In 2002, Makivik negotiated and signed a partnership agreement on economic and community development in Nunavik, commonly known as Sanakotik Agreement. This agreement was the beginning of a new relationship with Quebec government and provides a baseline and a mechanism of economic development and equally addresses important social issues. In the 40 years since the establishment of Makivik Corporation, Nunavik Inuit have seen significant growth in the state of relevant businesses opportunities in the region, as well as throughout the north. We own businesses with activities with variety of fields, including 2 successful airlines, First Air and Air Inuit, which operate a combined fleet of 43 aircrafts and provide charter, passenger, and cargo services. Within Nunavik and Pan-Canadian Arctic. Also, we own Nunavik Rotors, which provides helicopter charter services in the region. In September 2014, gross revenues in the transportation sector alone total $340 million. We're involved in other joint venture businesses, including the marine shipping company NIAS, which provides maritime transportation services throughout Nunavik and Nunavut. Additionally, we own Nunavik Geomatics, which is a consulting firm focusing on cartography services. Kauta Construction, a company specialized in civil and residential housing projects. Hallutik Enterprises, which is a field distributing company. Nunavik Creations produces custom-made fashion clothing and captures artistic style incorporating local materials. Over the preceding 35 years, Makivik has established a solid reputation in the northern fishing industry. We have successfully researched and developed a viable shrimp fishery in Hudson Strait and Davis Strait. We are full owners of a license and operate in partnership with Newfound Resources, a Newfoundland-based company, and also through Unak Fisheries. We share a shrimp license with Hikitala Corporation. Over the years, it has trained Inuit crews and developed partnership with major national and international fishing companies. All of these companies are important contributors to the North, its economy, and its community. Our many successes, both economic and social, have not come without significant effort and severe challenges. All of you who live within the borders of the Arctic are only too aware of the environmental conditions, that the environmental conditions are extreme. On one hand, winter frazzle ice in our waterways complicate the placement of in-river turbines, while on the other, climate change has resulted in permafrost melting, threatening the foundation of our buildings and our airstrips. Geographic isolation of our communities, which limit the transportation access to this by sea, and fluctuation of costs of fuel by air transportation render business operation more difficult. For the most part, our youth must travel great distance to southern institutions to obtain specialized training or higher education. Separation from family, friends, and home cause disruption and social trauma. It appears to me obsolete, incomprehensible that despite damming of the La Grande River, we build a massive hydroelectric development. Electricity in Nunavik communities is provided by fossil fuel generator plants. These generators experience common brownouts, if not blackouts, contribute to the carbon output, burden driving the climate change, and impose limitations on housing size, design, and electric heating cannot be utilized. I must raise an important question: why is a branch electric line has not been constructed, and why are we not connected to the Hydro-Quebec grid? I hear the bell ring, and I still have a lot to say, but like all Pan-Arctic people of the Arctic, we are all bound by common reliance on wildlife resources. We depend on resources for subsistence food, which we obtain regularly from the land, water, and air in our homeland. So I wanted to show you the abundance of beautiful wildlife that we have. I have much to say, but I'm gonna try to speed through these. We have mining that's been coming in our region quite a bit. We have 2 operating mines, a lot of exploration. And right now we're looking at alternate energy, which is something that we're really trying to look with specialized business entrepreneurs and governments to view for joint venture opportunities that will reduce and ultimately eliminate dependence on diesel generating hydro plants. There are other benefits to the region that I would have liked to talk about, but again, we're very stressed for time. Opportunities are limitless. There are businesses to be made. There are all kinds of ideas that need to be hashed out, but again, we're always strapped for time, which is very unfortunate. But to conclude, I want to make clear that we are not against development. Indeed, development provides opportunities for Makivik to lead the path forward, improving the quality of life for future generations. As I stated in both past Arctic Circle conferences I attended, I will repeat: the development of the Arctic must be done in a sustainable manner in respect of the spirit of the letter of existing treaties, with respect to the wildlife and the environment, and considering the people of the Arctic first and foremost. We are committed to work in partnership with government and industry if these fundamental principles are fulfilled. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Alugu. Our next speaker is Executive Director for International Center for Reindeer Husbandry, Mr. Anders Oskal from Norway. Before we start, I would like to remind you all speakers, please do have our translators in mind so that they can translate your speech in a proper way. Thank you.
Excellencies, inhabitants and friends of the Arctic, I am delighted to be back on the land of the Inuit, our brothers and sisters in this part of the world. I'm also delighted to be back in Nuuk to take part in this very important conference. I would also like to thank the organizers for inviting, and specifically the government of Greenland for supporting my travel here. My point of departure is reindeer herding. Hopefully that will have a wider relevance as well. I will be addressing business and policy together within the context of Arctic change. And I have some PowerPoints. I might have to turn my head a bit, sorry about that. This map shows the reindeer herding areas in the world, 24 indigenous peoples in all, spread across 10 national states, Greenland being one of them. Close to 100,000 people altogether if we count everyone. And on the one hand, one might say that that is a small number of people if we look at the global context. If we turn it around and say that, look at it as an industry, then we would have, how to say, close to 100,000 employees. So suddenly it is not as small anymore. Certainly it is not a small livelihood in the Arctic, representing one of the largest users of the Arctic landmass. And it is, of course, our reindeer, an Arctic living resource, between 2 to 3.5 million reindeer the last decades. In addition, we would have wild reindeer. And it is a typical indigenous livelihood, or perhaps even livelihoods, as our peoples are following a wide range, diversity of different traditional activities, such as hunting, fishing, gathering, and so on. And it is still organized. Its basic model is quite similar everywhere it's found, leading us to the thought that it is a model for management of these barren Arctic and subarctic areas. One point that I need to make is that there are fundamental differences between reindeer herding and agriculture. Typically, reindeer herding is managed from the point of view of agricultural models. And this is challenging from a policy point of view, as if the only tool you have is a hammer, pretty soon all problems start to look like nails. We could contrast the difference between agriculture and reindeer herding, pastoralism, in the following way. If you are into agriculture, what you do is to try to control the animals at any given time. In the case of reindeer herders, it's the opposite. We follow the reindeer, not the other way around. And so this is a fundamental difference in the systems that we are talking about. If anything, I would compare instead reindeer herding with fishing. We have a lot of gentlemen from the fishing industry here, showing you a graph of the cyclicality of reindeer numbers in Sweden. There are also no word for stability in the Sami language. And so we do know a few things about change. And indeed, the world is changing. The Arctic, despite recent setbacks, is very quickly becoming an integrated part of global economy. That, in combination with climate change, socioeconomic change, political change, makes for an unprecedented challenging situation for our communities. And as we are seeing an explosion of policy, research, and development agendas in the Arctic, the fact remains that those who are most dependent on nature are also most vulnerable when that nature changes. On the other hand, change means both possibilities and challenges. Our peoples, though, often find themselves in a situation where we are not in a position to exploit the possibilities of a changing Arctic due to the fact that there are a lot of negative pressures, as was mentioned by earlier speakers. But still, we would like to also focus on the opportunities from an internal perspective. And this is important, not least for our youth. This is the backdrop for a new project that we have endorsed in the Arctic Council, co-led by Canada, Denmark, Greenland, Norway, Russia, USA, the Aleutians and Sami Council, where we are working to facilitate education, facilitate documentation of traditional knowledge, providing mechanisms for youth who want to be entrepreneurs. And I figured I would share some of the thinking around this project. And to do that, why don't we start with some economic history, the question of what made Great Britain great? And I'm sure there are many answers. Mine is this. England before the 1500s was based, its economy was much based on wool production. And it was exported and produced into textiles in the continent. Along came the Tudor clan with their Tudor plan, so to speak, started with Henry VII and gaining its maximum, we could say, under Queen Elizabeth, in which one imposed a ban on exports, actually capital punishment for those who exported illegally, export taxes, protectionism, in order to industrialize their own production. And this laid the basis for the development then of England. And someone has said that there are two criteria for colonies. One of them is that colonies are not allowed to produce or to industrialize their own raw materials. In this case, this principle was applied in reverse. For those who are especially interested, I could recommend this book by a professor we know. We don't have time to go further. Now, to contrast this, one could argue that this is the opposite has in fact happened in Norway, to bring that up as an example, where for 40 years we've had a regime in place that has established a purchase monopoly, or monopsony as it's called, where we would have a quite severe concentration of power in the food chain, in the slaughtering sector. And furthermore, marketing has been handed over politically, not by market forces, but handed over politically to the meat monopoly of Norway, which to many reindeer herders is as smart as Pepsi-Cola asking Coca-Cola to market and sell their products. And this has been quite severe. The price, as you can see here, to producers was cut in half in 15 years, while the costs increased. It has been a period which has broken the backbone of the economy of reindeer husbandry in Norway, to bring that out as one example. We find parallels to this in Russia, where we've had the collectivization, forced collectivization. Some of the same mechanisms are at play there. This is not the best climate for entrepreneurship. So what options do we have then? We need to focus on how much we get out of each single animal. And experience shows that increasing value added from reindeer products is fairly easy. What is challenging is to do it in a way that also benefit primary producers. And there are many reasons for this. At another point in time, I might be able to elaborate. I have to continue. So what are the answers? Well, what is the way ahead? I think no one has an answer, but not the full answer, but part of it has to be this. We have to use the knowledge of our own people to develop our own societies. And since we are talking about a global Arctic, why don't we be inspired by the non-Arctic world as well? I've drawn up a couple of examples from Italy. These are two of the stars of the culinary night sky, if we could say it like that, Parma ham and Parmesan cheese. What is interesting here is that these are traditional products, revitalized for modern markets. And it's done by small-scale producers working together and competing in networks. And indeed, Arctic food resources are special, and we do have some potential. And the knowledge, the culinary traditions of all the indigenous peoples is not used enough, not used appropriately. It's a win for all. Think about how it links to tourism, for instance. It's sustainable. I guess no one comes to Nuuk to eat chicken wings, right? And to further this work, we have constructed something we call the Arctic Indigenous Peoples Culinary Institute to lift the focus on the food resources and the food culture of Arctic Indigenous peoples, engaging institutions in research, education, documentation of traditional knowledge. Our point of departure is our own tradition, a very strong tradition to use everything. That is a lesson for the world. And also, what can we get out of the resources we have? You have to start with what you have. With this work, we're trying to connect spheres that are usually not as well connected. Business and academia, to connect traditional knowledge with science, and to connect the traditional with the modern or new. Some final observations. We need to have a focus on innovation and entrepreneurship, and we have to do these things ourselves. Decolonization also means to add value to our own raw materials, our own products, and it means to take back entrepreneurship, our own Tudor plan, if you will. Besides, contact with end users is a key factor for development of any industry. I'm sure many can attest to this in this panel. And we also need to focus on the development on our own premises, our own knowledge and our own people. Empowerment was a word used. We need also economic empowerment of our youth. We have the knowledge, we have the products, and we have the best stories to go along with them. And so therefore, the market could, if able to work, be also Reindeer Høde's best friend. So, Arctic change is on our horizon. Therefore, we need economic development. But what kind? We also need economic development of, by, and for the indigenous societies in the Arctic. Economic freedom of Reindeer Hødes is a key factor to avoid vulnerability. We need to have the opportunities of a changing Arctic be opportunities for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Anders Oskal. The next speaker is CEO in Royal Greenland, the biggest seafood company in Greenland, Mr. Mikael Tinghus.
Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me to the panel. I hope we'll have some really nice discussions afterwards, and then Royal Greenland, to those of you who don't know it, we're owned by the Greenlandic government. We have annual revenues of around 5 billion Danish kroners, a bit more than 2,000 employees, of which 1,200, or a bit more than 1,200 here in Greenland. We operate 37 factories in as many different towns and villages in Greenland, 5 in Newfoundland, 1 in Quebec, and a couple in Western Europe. We also own and operate 6 factory trawlers and a fleet of large and small inshore vessels. So although not all of it is actually in the Arctic, it's certainly all in the north. And I think what is probably important to understand is that this is not subsistence fishing based on traditional methods. It might very well be how it started, but this is very much industrial now. We compete directly on world markets with companies which are not owned by traditional cultures. Our main species are shrimp, Greenland halibut, crab, cod, but basically we buy and process anything sold to us last year by 1,658 Greenlandic fishermen, small independent ones, and several hundred in Canada. Our main markets are Germany, UK, Scandinavia, Japan, and China. And in Japan and China, we actually sell more than 500 million Danish kroners worth every year, all through our own sales subsidiaries. We just made a significant acquisition in Canada, which will add the United States to our list of main markets. The main point being that some of which might have been true 50 years ago is now very different. Last year, our total volumes of fish and shrimp sold was about 100,000 tons. And even though Greenlandic people like to eat fish, it's probably fair to say that for every kilo eaten in Greenland, we sold at least 100 or several hundred kilos abroad. And it's important to understand some of these changes so one does not just extrapolate from how things were and then we think, this is just the same but bigger. I haven't brought a presentation, but I brought 3 subjects that I hope we'll be able to discuss in the panel afterwards. And because it's late and some of us look a bit drowsy already, I will phrase these subjects a little bit more black and white perhaps than what I feel, but this will make it easier for discussion. So subject number 1 or statement number 1 is that fisheries must be managed in accordance with formal and preferably certified management plans. This is the same everywhere in the world. If fisheries are unmanaged or uncontrolled, the resources will be overfished. Sometimes it is assumed that in traditional cultures this is different. In my experience, that is not the case. It's more a reflection of Western romanticism. And we think, there were good old days when human beings were less evil than what we are today. I think, in fact, human beings are exactly the same everywhere, whether in China, Mexico, Greenland, or Germany, or Canada, or Norway, or Iceland. We are a highly successful predator, and we will outcompete any other species around. I think one of the main reason that we think that in the good old days there were different cultures that were consciously sustainable is that the human population was tiny. And our hunting methods or fishing methods were much less efficient than what you will see on a factory trawler today. So my first statement is that management plans and adherence to management plans are mandatory in the Arctic as much as everywhere else in the world. The second statement is that the political framework around fisheries must be based on informed, long-term, and basically consensual visions. The discussions about fisheries must be transparent, they must be non-confrontational, and there must be room for nuance, as the French would say. Now, in some parts of the Arctic, including Greenland, fisheries are tremendously important. Fish and shrimp generate somewhere between 90–95% of all export income of Greenland. So it is obvious that there is a big interest in it, or in them. Now, I'll give you one example. I said we operate 37 factories in as many towns and villages, and some of our competitors probably operate, let's say, 7 or 8 factories in places where we are not. So there's about 45 different towns and villages in Greenland that has its own factory. If you have your own fish factory, you can have your own fishing fleet in that place, and people can actually live there. If there is no factory, there will be no fishermen and there will be no people living there. And there is a strong and very legitimate wish across parties in Greenland, as in many places in the north, that people should be able to live in small communities. At the same time, if we compare the efficiency and the productivity of using factory trawlers with the efficiency given the difficult infrastructure of small land-based factories, the factory trawlers are much more efficient. So if we were just to optimize financially, and we contribute greatly to the Greenlandic state through dividends, through taxes paid, through licensing fees, and so on. If we were just to optimize that, there should be more offshore fishing methods. If, on the other hand, we want to protect coastal communities, there should be more inshore fishing. Now, so which one to choose? My father said always, when I was young, I had very strong and simple opinions, as many teenagers do. And my father always said, Michael, on this subject, please remember there might be more than one intelligent opinion. And this is exactly one of those cases. This needs to be debated based on facts, based on transparent expression of what are the wishes, and understanding that you can't always get everything. You make choices. Now, sadly, the world is not really favoring informed long-term consensual visions or non-confrontational discussions. From South America to North America, from Western Europe to Eastern Europe, and even, I'm sure, somewhere in the Arctic, I mean, the world belongs to populists. Simple solutions and simple slogans that do more damage than good. I would hope, we could hope, that the Arctic communities, with our small populations and shared challenges and opportunities, could be the first to turn our back to slogan-based politics and actually look into more long-term visions consensually. My third and last point is that the single greatest challenge to the Arctic fisheries, and I would say northern fisheries, because the same is true in Far East Russia, the same is true in Murmansk, it's true in North America, in Greenland, northern Norway, possibly not in Iceland, is the lack of human resources at all levels. We already today, we lack blue-collar workers, foremen, machinists, captains, IT people, business controllers, and sometimes even CEOs. If we look forward, this is not going to get any better. We strive very hard to maximize the amount of processing done within Greenland, just as you just explained with the reindeer. This requires more resources, and if we look at the populations are small and there are relatively low levels of education. This is exacerbated by net immigration, which means that the population, not just in Greenland, but many northern societies, is declining. Now, part of this is due to a mega trend, urbanization. That's really difficult to do anything about this. You'll see it in farming communities all over Europe and America also. So what can we do about this? Well, obviously, as we said in the previous session, education, education, education. We have many Faroese officers on our ships, and this is not liked very well in Greenland. But the truth is that the alternative in some cases would be that there would be no ships. We have to import labor from outside, and then it's good we do it from another northern country, obviously. But there is something we can do to fight what comes on top of the global trend of urbanization. And this is to make the Arctic a better place to live, not just a better place to visit as a tourist or as an NGO. This has something to do with jobs and opportunities, but it's also to look in the mirror, and several of the speakers did this before, and to say this is a harsh place to start with. But we make it worse by very high rates of violence, not least against women, by abuse of alcohol, drugs, and children, and by horrendous rates of murder and suicide. So if you're a young woman, and if you have kids, or you're looking forward to get kids, do you think you would consider, maybe I should leave this place and go to somewhere where there's greater physical safety for myself and my kids? I would. And many women do. My hope is that we could bring this down to just European average levels, so that the company I work for also has access to competent staff in 10, 20, and 50 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mikael Tinghus. 4 gone and 4 to go. And next speaker is Peter from Inuit Silla. The floor is yours.
And I wish to thank the Icelandic president for also inviting me here. I will be speaking in English. I'm Greenlandic, but I moved to the Canadian Arctic in 1981. So my Danish and my Greenlandic is a little bit rusty. I would like to speak about seals and sealing as our economy. And please remind me if I don't hear the ring. You guys are going to go like this to me time for me to get off. I was just in Europe on several occasions with Inuit Sila, and it was a great honor to be with Koenepi Ko, the hunters and fishermen whom I traveled with to the European Parliament on several occasions. They have taught me a lot, and I've been going to Europe since 2007 to promote and talk about Inuit sealing and our ability to sell sealskin and sealskin products. I'm sure you're aware of the European seal ban that took effect in 2009, where we couldn't bring into Europe sealskin products from Canada and from Inuit. Our market crashed. We have booklets. When you leave this room, you can pick up the booklets and get the numbers. But our market crashed, both in Greenland and in Nunavut, to a level of 80 to 90% drop in our exports. And the prices of the sealskins fell. I'm so pleased to hear that the panelists here and earlier today have been talking about economic development, about natural resources, about renewable and non-renewable resources, and how important it is to live and utilize our own resources. There's between 8 million to 12 million harp seals. And just referring back to Royal Greenland, talking about how you have to regulate fishing, likewise, the 8 to 14 million harp seals in 1 year consume 8 to 14 million tons of fish. That is a lot of fish that the harp seals are consuming. And in Inuit tradition, we've always known this, that for a healthy population means not overpopulation, a population that is controlled and healthy. If you have 14 million harp seals, it is very unhealthy. They're coming, now we are seeing harp seals in the Arctic where we didn't see them before. It could also be climate change. But in Frobisher Bay, we hardly see ring seals anymore. We see a lot of harp seals now eating all the Arctic char that we also live on. When the anti-sealing campaign began in the 60s, 70s, the number of harp seals was 1.5 million. Today we have between 8 to 14 million harp seals. So there's no need to protect the harp seals anymore. In fact, we need to, again, be able to sell the sealskins, as one of the speakers here said. We are coastal communities in Nunavut. 26 out of our 27 communities are coastal, and we have always lived on the seal. This is our economy. Our hunters need to be able to sell the seal skin in order to provide for the highest insecure, developed country that we live in. In Nunavut, we have the highest insecure population of food security. If I take this amount of harp seal meat, it contains as much iron as 56 pieces of sausage. 56. This is important because seal is what we need to survive and to stay healthy. But with the byproducts, we also need to open the market into Europe, so the seal and the seal hunter is not seen as savages. We've been called savages and so far behind. Okay, so you regulate us and you put requirements for Inuit to follow. Europeans are telling us how to hunt our seals and the requirements are being put in place, while at the same time, this is schizophrenic or bipolar, I don't know. At the same time, Europeans can kill, apply for licenses to kill because they need to regulate. There's way too many seals, and they let them sink because they're not allowed to use them for anything. How come we are being regulated and follow regulations, and we have to be sustainable, traditional, everything, while at the same time Europe just wastes all the seal? But you know it's very healthy. Seal skin is very healthy, and I think Europeans should get to eat seal again, because you used to do that earlier. Let us work together. After the ban in 2009 until 2015, there were no markets for Inuit. We went hungry and we couldn't sell our products. Now there's some way we can sell products into Europe, but all that negative campaign has destroyed the market. It's not cool to wear a seal. It's not, you're barbaric if you're hunting seals. And while there are way too many harp seals at the same time, we need to educate Europeans that Inuit have an exemption which is not working right now. We are trying to make it work. But we need to go to Europe. We need to go to Denmark. We need to go to the United States. By the way, the United States still has their ban, and we'll tackle that at another time. What we would like to propose with Inuit Sila, and thank you Inuit Sila, we are just starting our own arm of Inuit Sila in Canada. We would like to do a pan-Europe press tour for many years to come. A certification system that works for all Inuit, that this seal skin is certified and you can sell it, which is not happening right now with the Inuit. An online campaign, information material for retailers, because right now even when you go to the border, the customs people will stop you because they think all seal is the same, that all seal is banned, which is not true. An information label, that everything you purchase will have a label that shows that it's an Inuit hunted seal. A knowledge hub and press tour. We just released a new documentary called Angry Inuk, and it was material that we collected for the past 8 years and filming on the effects of the European seal ban, Inuit exemption. And we had standing ovations at the Toronto International Film Festival. It was so well received. And it is my suggestion that all the parliamentarians of the European community should watch it. It should be given a copy and they should watch it, be forced to watch it even if they didn't want to, because that's a piece of legislation that has harmed Inuit gravely. And we need to make the fashion. We need to make it fashionable again, not only in the Inuit communities, but also in Europe to wear sealskin and be proud to wear it. Even though I'm dying of heat right now, I'll keep this on because it's made out of sealskin. We make new sealskin products in Nunavut and in Greenland. I see many beautiful products. And this is dyed green. We have many different colors and many different designs. We have Great Greenland has amazing, amazing sealskin products. And so do we, and Nunavik does, and Labrador does. So we need to open up the market where we can again trade and be proud of our heritage and our culture. In closing, we also need to do this for our younger population. We need our younger Inuit men and women to be proud of seal hunting and the eating of seal. We need to take back our pride in the seal. And I hope that when you're leaving, take a copy of our information about Inuit Sila and what we are proposing to the European Commission. Kuya Namik, thank you. Kuya Nakso.
Thank you, Peter. Our next speaker is President of Nunavik Incorporated, Mrs. Kari Tautungi.
Madame et Monsieur, s'il vous plaît, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, Inokatika, tamani no anakpok, Kalaallit nunani Inokatika ni takugama, Kuya Namik, Kuya Nakolushuak, tunga suktitawgata. I said in Canada I wanted to speak to the future of economics. My grandfather told my family that we can live without the white man's money. Economics is anything to do with money. So we were the last family to go into a community. But the Inuit people that were living around the Roman Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, the Hudson's Bay Store, we would call them Kablunagmiu, which meant white people's people. My family was called Ivilingmiu, our ancestry, people of the walrus, and there was Natchalikmiu, people of the seal. Kailnilmiu. In saying that, I would like to say, as a hunter, I'm going to put in the prevailing authority that exists in the Inuit mind and economics, how we switch with rapid modernization in Nunavut, very rapid. From 1972, we moved into a community. It's now 2016. My father was born before there were white people on Southampton Island. In fact, in 1979, when I graduated from high school, I went back to Coral Harbor. It's an island, Southampton Island. I had $150,000 for a university in British Columbia, a scholarship. At my father, there was a man sitting there, and my father said, "Panik," he told me, "daughter of mine, this is the man you're going to marry." The prevailing authority that exists in me as an Inuk was never to talk back to my father, never. That was one time I had wanted to say no, but my father told me, I know his ancestry, I know his dependent. When he's mature, he'll be the man for you. The trust for my life. I trusted my father. Today, after 38 years, he's still my husband. Same thing with economics, money. How do we Inuit, as a people, hunt and distribution of wealth? We see our indigenous people with clothes. So how is the money? How would we deal with the money with our clothes, with our clothing? We go out as a hunter. As president of Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated, I am responsible for $42 million a year. And our board, on top of another board, is responsible for Nunavut trusts over $1 billion a year. Because in our history with the government of Canada, we surrendered, extinguished, and ceded for all time those of us, including our unborn children. So that money that we were hunting, economics, has to enable us to survive for generations to come. Did you know within the Inuit there was a prophecy? That prophecy said, Asivak. Asivak is a spider. Asivak will cover the earth. Think about it. Asivak in the Inuit world, thousands of years ago, was the internet covering the earth. So our societies, indigenous societies, have the means and the ability to survive with money and make money work for us. That's where the connect, the prevailing authority that exists in the Inuit mind and the institutionalized authorities clash. As president of NTI, I made sure the board of NTI, when mining industries like the Deputy Premier of Nunavut was saying, started to mine on our lands, I made sure that what has happened in other parts of the world, industry, resource development, understood they would just not take out the wealth of our country and leave us with nothing. Today in Nunavut, in 2010, as president, I created what's called royalty resource sharing. Every time a mine is mined on Inuit-owned lands, we get 12% for subsurface. For surface land, regional Inuit associations negotiate impact benefits agreement. I was very interested in what this lady was asking. How is the wealth distributed? In our world, in the indigenous societies, we always shared what we hunted. In fact, did you know that a seal meat, had a woman part that the woman ate, and a male part that the men ate. In doing so, we came up with that revenue resource sharing policy, so the subsurface royalties go to all Inuit across Nunavut. But the surface, the top of the land, goes just to one region, the most impacted region. In QIA, Baffin Island, they negotiated up to $21 million. In another region, in Kalaallit, they negotiated, just for the signing, $5 million. It's how industry works, and make it change for you. In doing that, to provide for certainty and clarity of rights to ownership and use of land and resources, the right for Inuit to participate in the decision-making concerning the use, management, and conservation of land, water, and resources, including the offshore. Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated is responsible for 12 miles offshore. We face the greatest risk of oil development, but we are facing benefits if resource development takes place. To provide Inuit with wildlife harvesting right, we have to take due diligence in terms of climate change and rights to participate in decision-making concerning wildlife harvesting. In saying that, to encourage self-reliance and the cultural and social well-being of land. Just recently, I signed with the government of Nunavut what's called NNI policy. We worked on it for 4 years on procurement contracts. We were facing in the local communities. Can you hear me? I want to get this across to you. Can you understand me? We were in the local communities, we were experiencing companies that just flew in their own staff, that flew in their own houses, worked on construction and left. So NTI hired the best procurement lawyers in the world, Borden, Layden, Jarvis. They do procurement contracting for different governments of the world. We came up with a plan. There are 332 Inuit firms under our registry, Inuit companies, Inuit men, Inuit women. To protect them, we decided every time the government contracts are open and these construction companies do not hire enough Inuit, do not hire our services, the penalties will climb. After so many penalties, we will ban them for a limited time from contracting procurements. You have the power, you have the authority. You don't just sit back. You can say to these companies, we are banning you for 2 years or 3 until you follow what we want to do. Simple? Yes. Tough? Yes. But the government of Nunavut, to their credit, worked with us and came up with that policy. Or governments for industry, indigenous communities, indigenous firms can put aside millions of dollars. Let's say they put $600 million for a contract. That $600 million will be scheduled just to go to Inuit firms, Inuit societies. Why should non-Inuit firms be the only ones getting contracts? We have to know, according to the traditional knowledge of the Inuit, that we can survive as a hunter in economic times. Agree? We can do it. It's the way money operates. If we just put money into social issues, suicides, social programs, it's not going to work. You have to have the economic development in and on your own terms. My time is up. Kuya namig nuanuk tema.
Thank you, Mrs. Katie Totongi. Our next speaker is Deputy Manager in Greenland Fishers Hunters Associations, Mr. Tyne Sugaard Bertelsen.
Thank you. I'm very humble after you. Okay, thank you for the invitation, organizers and Mr. President Crimson. And we are very happy to be here from KNBK. You presented the catching or the hunting of seal sites, so I will focus on fisheries. Yes. Short intro. It has been a long day, so you must be tired, so I will do it briefly. I will do a short intro. I know that there are many from Greenland, but some from abroad could be interested in knowing more about our organization. And I will, because the headline is living resources, so I will do also mapping about the living resources on and around Greenland. Then I will divide it into species, and just briefly also address the sustainability, global warming, what we have seen, and finally, a statement from KNBK. Thank you. KNBK was established in 1953. Today we have more than 70 branches from Thule, Qaanaaq, and Southern, and to the East Greenland, Itoqotomit. We have more than 2,400 paying members. Some of them are not active all year round, but many of the members, they are active fishermen and hunters all year round. Our members are typically, the picture to the left, a dinghy fisherman. You can see it typically in Disco Bay area and north on, and of course, more south. These days, the lungfish row is going on very actively, and you can see the dinghies working along the coast. The second picture is a small shrimp vessel. The shrimp fisheries started in the late 70s, and that kind of vessels were introduced. And the picture to the right is very typical for Greenlandic fishing vessel. They were introduced to Greenland in the 60s, and they have been around since. And I will not address the age of the fleet, but it's very old nowadays. But I could maybe briefly address that. Our organization is structured like we have a general meeting. It's 4th year. We have an elected chairman. And as you can see, a vice chairman and 2 elected members of board of directors. And the rest of the circles, they are representing the branches or councils. The organization were regrouped in 2013 and have had that structure since. As you can see, we have divided into species. And the last one to the left, council game, we have the marine mammals, onshore and in waters, in that fora. So we have the meetings at least 4 times a year, and when we have hearings to the legislation, they will also have some meetings. The last one, Pelagic Council, we will go back to that. It's on the establishment. And what do we utilize? And what do we have of tax, TACs? As you can see on the list, we are allowed to catch 194 minke whales, humpback whales 12, and etc. there are quite substantial numbers, but not all hunters are not that pleased with the numbers. They could wish that there were some higher numbers on some certain species. To the left, we have the land animals. That's the actual catch figures. If we go to the fish species, according to Greenland Institute of Natural Resources, there are more than 250 species swimming in our waters. 2 are, in our point of view, in our organizations, major species, prawn and Greenland halibut. Then we have seen mackerel, but it has there have been some fluctuation. It went up and suddenly it disappeared. Not really, but diminished. 4 in our terms are medium, snow crab, cod, lungfish, and Atlantic wolfish. Then we have several smaller. They are not always commercial, but of course they will be important for some parts of the country. Then if we see the values or volumes, prawn, according to the official statistics, 41,000 tons, but it's of course very small. The reason is that it is actual production. In order to produce cooked and peeled, you need 3 kilos in order to produce 1 kilo. So it's not representing the whole weight, round fish. Mackerel, 28,000. Well, actually, I think it was 32,000 last year. But the year before, it went up to 78. So there were a kind of Klondiking atmosphere, and everybody were interested in entering the fisheries. So I will not call it a war, but there was a battle about the quotas. Snow crab, well, again, it's actual production number. The catch number will be 1,900 tons, metric tons. Value, you can read it yourself. But as it was mentioned earlier, the value of fish species represents 92.4% 2 years ago. So it's very significant and very important for our economy. Of course, we shall run our fisheries with fish regulation. And it was mentioned by the CEO of Royal Greenland that we need fisheries management plans. And we are very agree on that from our organization. We are working on it, we are very active, and there is an ongoing revision of the Fisheries Act. And in the revision, the fisheries management are also addressed. So we are taking care of that. We will be very active and supporting to the process. I have an example, but because of the pling, I will not go so much into the management plan. But when you are following the news from Greenland, you can get the image that we are always asking for added TACs, added quotas, but it's not the case. We have the management plan and we respect that. Like one of the most well-known politicians used to say, we have never eradicated any species. So we will not do it, and we will, from our organization, be a very strong part in that work. In 1953, when KNPK was established, one of the main purposes of the setting up inauguration was the term that we shall protect our resources. The term sustainability was not invented at that time, but we had a very similar in our main purpose of the organization. So finally, traditional knowledge has politically been encouraged, but in actual real world, we haven't seen it materialized yet. But I know that there, in the current regime, they stipulated that it shall be incorporated in the Fisheries Act. Global warming is very exciting, and we saw a new species, mackerel, very good, and we hope that we will see some more. So there are both pros and cons in global warming. So, and the living resources, my ancestors, they went into our fjord, Greenland, and we are the 5th generation who have utilized the Arctic jar. So we should also continue to run our resources ourselves, but of course in respect to international law. Thank you.
Thank you, Tønnes Bertelsen. And our last speaker is Senior Advisor, Fisheries Agriculture Department in FAO, also called Food and Agricultural Organizations of the United Nations, Mr. Gudni Prakason.
President of the Parliament of Greenland, President of Iceland, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I bring you greetings from Rome, from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and from the Director General of FAO, Dr. Graziano, and Mr. Mattisen, who is Assistant Director General for Fisheries and Aquaculture at FAO. Now, the previous discussion has clearly demonstrated how important living marine resources are for the economy, businesses, and future welfare of the people and populations of the Arctic. And this applies both to coastal and small-scale fisheries, as well as to industrial fisheries. The discussion here has also reinforced the view that FAO, as well as the UN as a whole, have an important role to play in this respect. Most people know FAO as an organization for development cooperation, very active in the southern part of the world. But in the context of the Arctic, its normative and standard-setting role, especially regarding oceans and fisheries, is more important. And when I speak of normative and standard-setting role, I mean international agreements, voluntary guidelines, plans of action, etc., which the membership negotiates upon. And to begin with the mandate of FAO, which is achieving food security for all, the eradication of hunger, food insecurity, as well as driving forward of economic and social process and progress for all, and sustainable management of natural resources. And it's important to, in this respect, to know that indigenous people are about 5% of the world's population, but 15% of the global poor. So this tells us quite a story. I would like to address the issue today from the perspective of the FAO, as well as from universally agreed UN efforts, and concentrate mainly upon two aspects: the FAO, the global work of the FAO in the service of indigenous people, and secondly, the work of the FAO in the service of sustainability of living natural resources. To begin with indigenous people, the fundamental UN document in this respect is the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which was referred to previously today, and there are, of course, several other conventions and regulations. The UN has also created the Permanent Forum of Indigenous Issues, which is incidentally taking place in New York this week, I believe, as well as the post of a special rapporteur on the rights of these people. Now, FAO has also done its best, and in 2008, it adopted a new strategic framework for the years 2010 to 2019. And indigenous people are especially mentioned in the plan's objectives regarding issues of sustainable management of land, water, genetic resources, as well as biodiversity. Two priorities in the framework are especially important for the topic of our discussion today. And allow me to mention those, that is the use of new communication and knowledge systems, better access to information, as well as preservation of traditional skills. And secondly, the increased economic opportunity for sustainable livelihoods. One of the major constraints of addressing the needs of indigenous people is the lack of access to markets and financial resources. Creating income-generating opportunities and building stable employment and businesses are central components of FAO's work. The FAO has put in place some international instruments that take into account the rights of indigenous people, and these are the two voluntary guidelines mainly that I have up on the wall here. And they put a special emphasis on the social and economic aspects, such as rights to land and rights to natural resources, employment issues, community issues, social issues, and not least on gender issues, which are especially important here as well as elsewhere. Now, these two guidelines are the guidelines on responsible governance of tenure of land, fisheries, and forests, and also guidelines on for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries in the context of food security. But the FAO has also a policy of regarding the private sector, and I'll just name a couple of key words in that respect. That is acceptance, the issue of community concern, and the corporate good contact. Now I come to the second part of my presentation, which is the sustainable management of living, natural, and marine resources. And without sustainability, there will be no possibility to establish or strengthen fisheries beyond activities aimed at being profitable activity and bringing benefits beyond subsistence. In this respect, we need to keep in mind that fish and fishery products are among the most traded food commodities worldwide. And fish trade plays a major role in the fishery industry as a creator of employment, food supplier, income, economic growth and development. And this fish trade has been considerably expanding in recent decades. Now, FAO and UN as well have developed several instruments, international instruments, which are very important, and I named but few there, and various agreements, for example, fighting illegal fishing, IUU fishing so-called, and some of them are named up there on the wall, but also the FAO Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries, which is some sort of Bible for us at the FAO when it comes to fisheries. And also, I like to mention the eco-labeling guidelines, which have been very useful for our countries. And FAO and climate change, the Arctic aspect, is of course very important and has been dealt with by these two key elements in FAO's work, which is the Department for Fisheries, which is a huge department, one of the most important in the FAO, with almost 300 employees, both in Rome and worldwide, and the Committee on Fisheries, which is the assembly of member countries, and this, incidentally, is one of the biggest gatherings of FAO and the United System, which meets biannually. Now, FAO was leading in establishing the so-called Global Partnership for Climate, Fisheries and Aquaculture, and the Blue Growth Initiative includes fisheries and is some sort of umbrella program for all kinds of projects and initiatives and policies with regard to fisheries. And within this framework, the FAO has launched at least 30 projects involving climate change, most of them, of course, in the Southern Hemisphere, but all of them have significance for our work up here. Now, another aspect is important, which is the regional fisheries management based on the Fish Stocks Agreement. There are about 60 such bodies in the world, some big, some smaller, some are strong, some are weak. We have the benefit of having 2 strong regional fisheries bodies, and I named 2 of them here, NEAFC and NAFO on the east and the west coast of Greenland. But of course there are several other organizations operating. All these bodies somehow are connected into the FAO through a certain network, which I mentioned there at the bottom. Now, we believe that there is a new momentum nowadays for fisheries and the oceans, and I list some of these important things there, like the Sustainable Development Goals, the climate change negotiations, and of course, I should add, after our experience here today, the ongoing work of the Arctic Circle and its importance for natural resources and fisheries. Now, to conclude, a few points that we have already touched up, some of them: the code of conduct, climate change, enabling indigenous people to make use of existing international agreements, inclusion of indigenous people, strengthen RFMOs, and look ahead to developments with the interests of indigenous people in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Kune Bragason. Utilization of marine living resources in Arctic is always a major issue, so as I expected, we are quite behind according to our schedule. First of all, I would like to thank all the speakers and pronounce that because we are behind according to our time schedule, we can only take one question from the audience. One question. Who's the lucky one to ask the question to all our speakers?
I'm Nils Andreas Masse with DNV GL, headquartered in Norway. I have a question for the last speaker from the UN. I've heard some very well argued comments regarding some of the export bans on food products from the Arctic. Is there something the United Nations would like to comment or to assist regarding those issues?
Yes. Can you hear me with this?
Speak up.
Good. Well, thank you very much for this question. My answer is fortunately very simple, and since I represent the FAO, I would like to state that we and that organization does not deal with those sensitive issues that you brought up, and several other speakers also in this panel have brought up. They are dealt with in various other UN bodies. And So therefore, I, in my capacity as a representative of the FAO, I'm not in a position to answer that. Thank you.
Anyone else with a short answer? Mrs. Katie Tongi?
I didn't quite get the question. Are you talking about a ban of companies, corporate companies? Is he?
Please hand over the microphone so that he can emphasize his question.
No, I listened
and
to
speak
all the
loudly.
Yeah, I listened to all the presentations from the minister initially, who commented on some of the export challenges for food. I mean, from sea mammals, land mammals, seals has been mentioned. So I was referring to the fact that there are living organisms, food that Arctic nations would like more efficiently to produce and to export. That was the basis for my question.
So what was the question?
Excuse me.
Well, I understood you that you were possibly referring to marine mammals, species, endangered species, etc. They are dealt with, as I mentioned, in different UN fora, like in CITES, like in IWC, as well as other organizations, but are not dealt with within the FAO. That was my point. I hope I answered your question.
And also a short comment from Mr. Anders Oskal.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if you will indulge me, I do have a comment to make, but it is to one of the other panelists. I cannot let it slide. Will you permit it?
Yeah, okay.
So this is to Michael from Royal Greenland, your first statement about the virtues, or rather vices, of Arctic indigenous peoples. Now, I would agree, reindeer herders are surprisingly similar to other human beings. But I do disagree with the premise of your statement, which seems to deal with that there is a misunderstanding that we are unnoble savages in the north. And let us remind ourselves that that narrative, particularly that narrative, has been used in former times by colonial states in their efforts to lay under them new territory. For instance, what the European states did in Africa. And I disagree, because we are not just single people, individuals. We, as indigenous peoples, have had our own traditional self-governance systems in place long before national states drew borders up north, long before regulation regimes that came from the outside were put in place, and certainly long before corporations and multinationals showed up in our homelands. A professor at Harvard did some studies on crab fishing and other types of fishing outside North America. He made a book called Origins of Virtue. It's highly recommended. Here he says that the tragedy of the commons does not occur until you discard traditional governance systems. That may have happened in parts of the Arctic. I know Greenland as well, but not all parts of the Arctic. In some areas, two ways of knowing, two ways of governing are existing side by side. In some areas, by all practical means, there is self-governance. And as far as reindeer herding peoples goes, I could tell you that our governing systems are based on consensus. Okay. So in my mind, it's when capitalism and majority rule arrives that one needs to regulate. We, on the other hand, have managed just fine.
Okay.